I wanted to live my own life. What they were asking of me was just too demanding. And I didn't have any real friends. I didn't, I mean, maybe one or two people that I could actually call my friends that, from that whole experience of being in that church. But besides that, I was losing myself. I didn't know who I was, and I would think about it a lot. I wanted my own life back.
Today, I'm talking with Joey, a former member of the World Mission Society Church of God, and he's going to be sharing about some of his experiences as a member of this group for several years, and then some of the things that caused him to eventually leave. And then also he'll be discussing a little bit about just how life has been since leaving. One of the narratives that this group kind of propagates to members is that life is going to be terrible, horrible if you decide to leave. And so I think as you hear from many other members' interviews, and as you're going to hear from Joey's, that's definitely not the case. If you're new to this channel, I produce a lot of content on this specific group. If you want to watch more interviews with former members, I'll put a link in the description of the video below to a playlist I created with all the different interviews with former members that I've done over the past few years. So that'll be there in the description below if you want to check that out. On this channel, I want to branch out a little bit more, and I've been doing that some and trying to cover other groups, similar groups that could be classified, I think, as cult groups, high demand, high control groups, and just covering different topics that relate to God and faith and things like that. And so in that, I've created recently in the past few months a separate YouTube channel called Answering the WMSCOG, and I'll also link that in the description below if you want to go over and subscribe to this new channel. This channel is going to more and more have most of the WMSCOG related content that I produce. And so I will still continue to put out some of the videos like this one on this channel, but there's going to be a lot of content over there on that new channel that you won't see over here. And so, yeah, I'd appreciate if you're interested in that, if you want to go over and subscribe. Again, that's the channel's called Answering the WMSCOG. I also just wanted to say thank you to all of the financial supporters of Great Light Studios. There's been a handful of people who have jumped on and either raised their support in the past month or two or become new supporters, and I so appreciate you guys, and it's a huge help. Just want to let you know that it's really is because of all of you guys who are willing to support the channel that I'm able to keep producing content both here on this channel and on the new one as well. So if you're interested at all in supporting financially, I'll put links in the description below as well to a couple ways you can do that and just some information about that. So thank you, and with all that said, here is my interview with Joey. Joey, how are you doing tonight?
So far, so good. I can't complain. Things are going well. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you doing this. We were introduced through a friend, somebody that people will probably be familiar with, Anthony.
Yeah.
How do you guys know each other? Did you go to the same church?
Yeah. So I met him whenever he moved to the church in Pittsburgh several years ago.
The church in Pittsburgh. Okay.
Yeah.
So how about to start off, could you just kind of give us a brief, like a snapshot, a bit of an overview of how long were you in the church? Which branch were you a member of? And then about how long it's been since you left?
Yeah, so I was a member of the church. I came in around August of 2013, and I was there up until about February of 2020, right before COVID shut everything down. So good. Okay,
about 7 years.
More or less, yeah.
Yeah. Well, take us back to like the beginning. Where were you at in life? What kind of stage of life were you in? Because, a lot of times people seem to be in, at least in many cases, people seem to be in sort of transitional stages of life where they're maybe more susceptible, open to different experiences, different ideas. So kind of where were you at in life when you joined, and kind of what was that initial thing that got you in?
Yeah. So my story is a little interesting. So when I was about 20 years old, I was working a full-time job, and all my friends are going to colleges, doing all sorts of different things with their lives, and we're all kind of separating. And I was looking for, a companion. I was looking for a girlfriend at the time. So I met someone through an internet dating site, and we started talking, wanted to get to know each other more. And it turned out she was a member of this church. So naturally, the first few weeks of dating, we wanted to be with each other, a lot. And she invited me to a Bible study. And I, at the time I was said, sure, why not? I'll check out a Bible study with you. That's what your interests are. Give it a shot. And from the jump when I got there, everyone was like crazy nice, like a little too nice. It was a lot, But at the time, I'm 20 years old. I'm like, all right, that's cool. Everyone's nice, and we started doing some Bible studies, and things were, good. I didn't see anything crazy, but I just kept going to them because she was going to them, and I'm like, well, I want to spend more time with you and get to know you and your surroundings, your friends, the things you like to do. So I kind of involved myself in that, and then things spiraled out of control.
Yeah. So how did that happen? Did it kind of transition from you just kind of going after the girl to you really started getting hooked by this doctrine? Like, I guess did they kind of start to get their doctrinal hooks in you in some way?
Yes, very, very much so. So it got to a point where I was becoming very interested in what they had to tell me, and what I was learning in the Bible and stuff. And I would go a few times by myself without her. And they started giving me a lot of Bible studies, and one that really stuck out to me, the name of the study was called like the Seal of God. And it put some fear in me, and they kind of put the pressure on me, like, look, this is what you need to do. You need to be here. You need to focus more on the afterlife, the spiritual world, rather than the physical. So that kind of, it instilled some fear in me. And I'm like, all right, well, I got to start devoting a lot more of my time, my energy, my own personal resources to being here and supporting, this church and everything. And that was within probably the first 6-7 months. And I wanted to do what was right in God's eyes at the time. And I remember speaking to the one kid who was teaching me, most of my lessons at the time. And I was like, hey, man, I think I should marry this girl I'm with. She's part of the church. We want to do right in God's eyes. And how that goes. So we kind of got married, and it was awkward. We got married on our own time, and it wasn't right. But we did it, and we stayed married for several years. And we both wanted to do what we believe was right in God's eyes. And we involved ourselves heavily in the church. We came almost every single day, preaching almost every day, stayed late for Bible studies. I mean, I'm sure you've talked to other members. We'd be at church to 10, 11 o'clock on weeknights, and we got to get up at 6:30 in the morning every day to go to work. It was consuming our life. It was a lot. It got to a point where we realized, we should probably, part ways and whatnot. And some members, overseers that were kind of giving us guidance at the time, they said, you should really try to stick it out. It's, God's will, put your best foot forward and, keep trying. And like deep down, if it wasn't for the church, we would have split ways, you do you, I'll do me. But it got to a point where we met with the pastor of the East Coast, and we went to the main church to seek guidance from him on what we should do, if we should get a divorce or if we should stay married. And he tried convincing me to come move to the main church location. And just something in my gut didn't sit well with me. I have my home, my family, my life here in Pittsburgh. I'm not ready to make that kind of commitment, for the gospel. And his idea for her was to move her to another branch church outside of the state. And so that really influenced our relationship a lot, because if it wasn't for his, guidance on that, things would have been much different.
Like, what was your experience throughout the years? I mean, that's a long time to be a member. So, I mean, good and bad, I guess, like what would be your general takeaway as you look back now at your different experiences you had?
It was very stressful. I felt like I was walking on eggshells almost every single day I was there. And I may have not even done anything wrong, but just because I've seen other members get rebuked or, put in place, so to speak, it's like, man, I don't want that to happen to me. But there have been many times where I've been gotten in trouble and rebuked and things like that in front of others. And it's rough. As a young adult, it kind of, makes you think like, wow, is this really how everyone my age is, supposed to feel when they go to church, And it's a lot of pressure. I remember doing things, you think you're doing something right, and then boom, you get a glaring look from the overseer, and it's wow, like I don't want to come here, but you want to do right in God's eyes, and you keep going. I mean, there'd be nights where it'd be hard to fall asleep because I know what would be happening the following day or what responsibilities they gave me, and it's just like, this isn't what I want to do, but you guys are kind of pressuring me to do these things for God.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, generally, like at first I enjoyed coming to it because it was new. I was meeting new people, the social aspect of it. But then it just started they really like got into me. You got to be here every day. And it destroyed my personal life with all my friends growing up. It put it crippled the relationship with my family for several years, and just finally, making amends with that. But it was rough.
So like what you say, it crippled your relationship with your family.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, could you expound on that a little bit? Like how did that play out, and why was it that it had an effect on those relationships?
Yeah. So like I was very close with my parents and my sisters growing up. I could be there for them at the drop of a hat. We talked about everything. We did everything together. And then from the beginning of joining that church, it just things, I invited them, I would preach to them, but from what I was kind of explained to the church, well, if they don't accept, that's on them, but you got to keep devoting your time here. If it'd be a Sunday, like, hey, I want to go visit my family. It's like, where are you going to come back to preach? Are you going to come back to study? You're going to come back to this? It's like, guys, I don't want to have to give you a schedule of what I'm doing on the weekend. Like, this is my own, personal day. I was here all day Saturday. Let me at least live my life on Sunday. But no, I felt like it was always someone just constantly on my back, just where I'm at. And it got to a point in my family, I had to decide between going to church or seeing my family. And most of the time I'd go to church. And I remember very specifically that I had a funeral for an aunt who was, my godmother I was very close with. And I couldn't stay at the funeral for more than 15, 20 minutes because I had to go keep a service. And at that time, I wasn't even in the church for very long, but they said, if there's another priest, stay away from him. Don't talk to him. His bad blood. I'm like, I think about all the times how the other half of my family are looking at me now, like, oh, you missed your aunt's funeral? Like, why would you do that? And I'm like, wow, I feel terrible. So a lot of things, I missed a lot of things with my own family, just growing up and with them growing up. And I regret that a lot. I live with that a lot, but I mean, thankfully we're really close now, but it was hard.
You've mentioned like wanting to do right in God's eyes, and that was kind of a motivator for I guess the obedience you showed and continuing to submit to the requests of these leaders and things like that. But when you talk about wanting to do right in God's eyes, I guess what like internally, like what was that? Was that, do you feel like that was like a sincere love, reverence for God, where you wanted to just, more like a real relationship sort of thing going on, where you wanted to serve him in that way? Or was it more, what was fear a part of that? Do you feel like there was any part of how this group, the doctrines and things like that, was it the fear of the consequences if you didn't do X, Y, and Z, and what would result if that was the case? So I mean, or maybe a mixture of both.
Yeah. So like growing up as a kid, I wasn't very religious, like whatsoever. Like I was Catholic, but I didn't go to church. I didn't practice anything, that kind of thing. So coming to this church was a very odd thing for my friends and family to see and see me go through and kind of evolve into that person at a young age. But when I was saying I wanted to do right in God's eyes, to them they're just like, well, what do you know about what's right in God's eyes? You've been to church maybe twice in your life prior to this. But I think I was afraid of how I was going to be kind of, I guess, judged in a way from what like the overseers at the time. It's easier for me to picture that moment in my head, and I'm trying to describe it in words. But I knew that, everything was great. If you're doing great, peaches and cream, smiles and laughter. Then the second you do something wrong, it's a whole different kind of atmosphere. So I think I wanted to do what was right in God's eyes and pleasing them and keeping the status quo within the church assembly.
Yeah.
If that kind of helps.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I mean, that sounds like a very performance-oriented sort of arrangement, both in the dynamic between you and, God and you and the leaders and the other members, where there wasn't, and you can disagree with this if you want in your experience, but it sounds like, things like unconditional love and acceptance and grace weren't really things that you experienced. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, like I said, everything was great if you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing and everything that they're asking of you. But the second you say, you know what, I can't stay late tonight, I have to do something at home, it's, well, what are you doing? You get 20 questions. It's like, well, I don't have to explain myself. We're grown adults here. Like, I have my own life too, They kind of guilt trip you on a lot of stuff. It's not fair. And that's, at least from my experience, I can't speak on others, but from my experience at a very early time being in the church, within the first year, I felt a lot of pressure, a lot of pressure like that. And it was overwhelming, because I had aspirations of doing different things towards a career path. But now I have to focus, how am I going to, serve the church on a Monday through Friday basis, working hours. It's like, I got to try to find a menial job and not something that's actually going to benefit my life, but just enough to get by so I can put all my focus towards the church and keep them happy and do what I'm supposed to.
Yeah. So do you think was the idea of hell, the fear of hell, judgment, it seems like that's something that this group emphasizes a lot. Again, the consequences of not doing all the things you're supposed to do and keeping up those things. So was that a factor at all? Was it more just the guilt and shame you would feel from the other members kind of looking down on you?
Initially, it was a little bit of both for the first maybe couple of years. And then they really started to instill within my experience just seeing with others and all the videos that they would show, they'd instill the fear of hell, and, are you going to be a sheep or are you going to be a goat? And they'd show all these different videos. And it's, when you're that in it, you got, blinders up. So you see that and it influences everything you do, every action you take throughout your day-to-day life. When you're at work, when you're driving in your car, you want to make sure you're as pure as possible. And it's, God forbid I slip, I make a mistake, I screw up. And is that it? They would say, say, if I don't go preaching today, and if God came or Father came the third time, and they didn't catch me preaching, am I going to go to hell? It was like a toss up, well, I don't know, maybe, it depends on your soul, if you, in your heart, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, I don't want to go to hell. I think I'm doing everything right, but you still feel like it's just not enough. And it was here, even after leaving. There was, after I left, I still had, kind of some fear internally, and it would keep me up at night a little bit. Like, man, did I make the right decision? And, and you start to doubt yourself. Thankfully, I have moved on past that, and it took a little bit after leaving. But but thankfully, the reason I left kind of a little scrambled is I got into a relationship with someone else, and thankfully, she's a wonderful human being. She helped me cope a lot through my experiences, and she listened to me, so much. Just hearing me talk and share those different experiences and letting me know that it's okay to be human. It's okay to have certain feelings and desires for the world. Just because they're not serving God directly doesn't mean you're, setting yourself up for eternal damnation. So I kind of cut myself some slack. I stopped being so hard on myself, and it made it easier to cope with, and just started doing normal things. Normal activities. I go camping. We like being outside. Spending time with friends, just doing normal people things, and slowly it kind of just helped me, I guess, navigate myself back into the world and having normal thoughts and not having so much stress or anxiety about thinking about prior consequences and stuff.
What were the red flags, I guess? What were some of the things that started going off in your mind? Did you start to have questions or doubts? The things that started to lead you ultimately to leaving?
I think for me, there wasn't a singular item that I saw as a red flag that made me say, what, this is nuts. I gotta go. It's my own desires. Like I wanted to be in a relationship with someone else. I wanted to live my own life. What they were asking of me was just too demanding. And I didn't have any real friends. I didn't, maybe one or two people that I could actually call my friends that, from that whole experience of being in that church. But besides that, I was losing myself. I didn't know who I was, and I would think about it a lot. And it would, I'd start to do more physical things. I'd listen to physical music. Towards the last, I think, 6 to 8 months, I was going a lot less, and just making up all these different excuses of why I couldn't go. And I wanted my own life back, and I think that's what came to because when I left, they were starting a new, different kind of East Coast activity for a new way how to study, and we have to learn these new study pamphlets and preach these to people, and going, preaching at 5:36 in the morning because we're trying to preach to 7 billion people. I'm like, guys, I don't want to do this. I'm not getting on a bus at 5:30 in the morning with billboards and yelling at people. Like, what are we doing here? Like, are people really going to listen? Apparently to them they will, but I didn't want to do it anymore. I said, this is nuts. Like, I just got sick of it.
Yeah. Were you, I guess, in that, did you still have like hangups with the doctrine? Did things, I mean, for a lot of members, and obviously everybody's experience is different, but did you have, hangups with prophecies about Ahnsahnghong, or did things come to your mind about, oh, well, what about this in the Bible? Or were those things just not, I guess, was your kind of desire to get your life back and your autonomy back so strong that those things weren't really a big influence?
Yeah, those things weren't as big of an influence, and I'll admit I was a little naive on some of the prophecies and studies after just seeing more videos, posts being in the church about other members' experiences being there, and the red flags with different prophecies and things like that. It just kind of made me scratch my head and think, wow, I didn't even think twice to fact check, a church, on what they were teaching. And lo and behold, the facts are there.
Yeah.
So, but for me, the main thing that kind of got me out was just I wanted my life back.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah. So what did your family think of it? Did your family talk to you about it? Did they share concerns about it? What was that like?
Yeah. So right away, I invited my family and my friends, and I invited both my two best friends, and they came for a service. And immediately after the service, I was walking them down. We were in like a 12th floor of this one business building. So I was down the elevator with them, and they're like, "Bro, what are you doing? Like, are you listening to the stuff they're talking to you about?" And of course, at the time, I'm like, "Yeah, what do you mean? This is the truth." And they're like, "No, it's not." And from then they kind of just really started to isolate themselves from me because unfortunately was very pushy with them. But with my family, they kept trying to, they gave me what I wanted to hear, like we'll come, we'll sit through a study, we'll come for an event, whatever. But deep down, they weren't actually committing themselves. They were trying to see what exactly was going on. I mean, my mom's a little crazy. And at one point she came in and said, "Hey, I got a private investigator. They investigated your church, all this stuff. You got to get out of here." I'm like, "Mom, you're crazy." But they tried for up until the very end, within maybe the last month of me being there, they were trying to get me out, and they were coming more, but they weren't coming to receive any like truth from that church or anything like that. They were coming for me because that was the only way that they could spend time with me.
Yeah.
And
so say that once more. Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, you're fine. I said I just wish I realized that's why they were coming before,
Yeah.
Time with me.
So what, I guess in that then, what was your thought process about your family, like in their attempts to get you out? Or, it sounds like they didn't necessarily speak positively about the church and their perception of what it was. So like, how did you, I guess, then perceive your family?
So I always loved them and everything like that. And I never talked bad about them or said, "You guys are going to be damned to hell if you don't come, and, you're going to be cursed by God." But I always tried to be optimistic and just tell them, like, "Well, one day you'll be here with me, sitting in service, or, one day we'll be doing things together. Like, I'm not losing out on you guys." But at the same time, if there's a decision where I had to devote myself to my family or the church, I was choosing the church 10 times out of 10, which sucked.
Right.
Yeah.
So what were some of your, can you think back to any experiences in the church that kind of stand out to you as, I guess that you look back and you can think, man, that just kind of shows the true colors of this group, or any particular experience that you might have had?
Yeah. So when I first was a member there, we had the overseers was one of them was I believe Puerto Rican, and then the other one was, I'm sorry, he was Dominican. The other one was Korean, and she was very nice, very nice. But there was an instance where we were cleaning up after dinner and everything on a weeknight, and one sister's father was coming into town, and he never gets to see his daughter. And she said, "All right, brothers, who's going to go study with this, with this member's father?" And I was only in the church for a couple months. I don't know anything. I would never consider myself one to teach someone anything like that. And I didn't raise my hand. I said, "I got work tomorrow, whatever." And she kind of went off. And at first, I didn't think she was serious, but she, in front of, I think, probably 12 or 14 members, just yelling at me, "You didn't do this. You're not going to bear fruit. What are you doing? Your heart's not in the right place." And I'm thinking, like, I have my own life too. Like, what do you, but how dare I speak out? So I just kind of kept my mouth shut and kept it moving. So the next day I didn't go to work, and I went to go meet with the member's dad, and he didn't show up because he didn't want to come see his daughter and do a Bible study with a stranger at a Starbucks in downtown Pittsburgh. Yeah, he's like, "That's not what I came to town for. I'm not doing this," which I don't fault him at all. But in order for myself and that sister to keep in contact, we exchanged cell phone numbers solely to communicate with each other like normal human beings. Somehow that got back to the Korean overseer. And again, she called me in the office and just let me have it. And it got to a point where I didn't know how to react and broke down a little in tears. And said, "Wow, I don't know how to respond appropriately to this. So I'm just going to just take it, I guess." But looking back, I'm like, what are you, crazy? We were texting each other where we're going to meet, in the city. But different things like that, the way they would rebuke was, it just goes over the handlebars a little bit.
Yeah. I think it'd be fair to say that would qualify as, a spiritually abusive sort of scenario where you have this person in authority, this position of authority over you, who's just kind of treating you like garbage. And because of the whole system that you're in, you're kind of, forced into this position where you can't really speak out. You can't really defend yourself because of the consequences of that. And so you just have to kind of take it.
Yeah. I got another experience. We had a huge event on the East Coast, and it was in the heat of summertime, man. It was so hot. And I think Anthony was there for this. He might remember, but we're all sitting, uniform, line by line, and we're all fully dressed in our suits and everything, and our preaching bags. It's hot outside. We've been standing outside for hours at this point, so we're hot, And I'm listening to the one pastor give his speech about something, and I don't feel too good. I feel, my hands are starting to sweat a little bit more. I start to get the chills a little bit. I feel like I'm about to pass out. So the two members in front of me in this single file row was my church leader at the time. So I push the one person out in front of me. I knock on his shoulder and say, "Hey, I'm going to pass out." So he drags me out of line and pulls me to the side. The medics gave me a water and granola bar, and I was fine. But at the very end, the pastor saw me and he said, "What's wrong with you? You're going to pass out? What are you, weak?" And I was like, "Ugh." He kind of just brushed it off. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't the only one, but I just happened to be up near the front." And I was like, wow, you could care less if I were to pass out or not.
Wow. So was that the same one that had yelled at you before, or was this a different one?
That was a different Korean overseer. This one was the main leader of the East Coast.
Okay. So overall, your experience there was one where you didn't feel a lot of genuine care, concern, love for you from your leadership.
From leadership, I mean, maybe like one or two leaders, but that's because we got close, and I was always the one member who was a little too physical, thinking worldly and stuff like that. So I would joke with them a lot and try to turn them away. I'd make jokes that were kind of crossing the lines a little bit, and I'd get in trouble for that. But yeah, I mean, everyone there, not even just the leaders and the overseers, but I mean, you talk to most of the members who are, in it. It's all fake, man. It's not genuine. It's all, "How are you doing? Oh my gosh, it's so great to see you." I'm like, let's talk about something else. Like, what do you like to do? I'm like, nothing. God, that's it.
So did you ever hear any end of the world predictions? Were you any sort of prophecies, things like that were taught that didn't come to pass, anything like that?
So I remember when I came, the first big feast that I remember, or not first big feast, but the, I don't know how you want to categorize it, but it was the year of Jubilee. And the way everyone was kind of explaining it was like, yeah, this is the year Father's going to come. This is going to be it. So I'm thinking like, okay, this is it. So that's when I was starting to really, sink my heels in and start to give everything I got, because I'm thinking, this is it. We only got a little bit of time, but nothing ever came about it. And then the next year was something else. The year after that was another thing. And the year after that was another thing, and so on and so forth. It always felt like the end was right here. I can't speak on a very specific prophecy that comes to mind where it was like, this is it, date and time, whatever. But it always felt like they kept just prolonging it. And it's like, guys, you've been saying the same thing since I came here, that this is it. Like, tomorrow could be it. I'm sick of hearing that. Like, I'm starting to call your bluff. I'm sure enough,
yeah.
Years, and I'm sure that's exactly what they're teaching now.
Yeah. So there's always this sort of underlying idea that the end is just right around the corner. It could come any second.
Any second.
And then it just never does. And they just keep kind of moving the goalposts back year after year.
That's like 70% of the topics of all their sermons. It narrows down to that. The end is near.
Yeah. And in my estimation, a reason that, in my opinion, that they would do something like that is because having that underlying fear that any day now the end could come, Father's going to return, that just gives them this extra amount of control and power over the members, makes them more malleable in their hands. Because if you can convince these members that, this is going to happen soon, could happen tomorrow, then, their attachments to normal everyday things will just be kind of severed. They're going to, it'll be much more easy to get their interests onto the things that they want them to be interested in, the things that they want them to be devoting their time, their energy, their money to. If they think that, doing anything else is pointless anyways, because, the end's coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that 1,000%. I mean, that's how it was, why do you need to save money? Why do you need a savings account? Get rid of that, donate it. That's your next offering. That's your next, contribution. I remember getting pulled into one of the overseer's offices because I wasn't making contributions for a couple months because I lived by myself and I was, trying to make ends meet. And I was doing the best that I thought I could. And he said, what are you doing? You can't contribute for this and that. How can you call yourself a gospel worker? How can you teach Bible study if you can't even contribute for this and that? And I'm thinking like, buddy, I got rent to pay. My landlord doesn't care about that. I have bills to pay. I have this and that. I have to take care of myself first so I can donate my time to you. But it's hard. Yeah. They instill that fear on you that, judgment day is coming any second now. So it's like, all right, well, I don't need to make more friends. I don't need to pursue other things. I can care less about my car. I'll drive it to, 6, 7, 8 hours to whichever church they want me to in a drop of a hat,
So with that, with your tithing, giving of your finances, was it communicated to you explicitly or even implicitly in the church that your tithing was connected to your salvation? Like, in other words, do you feel like there was an idea given to you that if you didn't tithe, I guess to put it bluntly, if you didn't tithe, you would go to hell? Was that what idea communicated to you?
Yeah, you're on the right path. If you stop tithing, that's a huge red flag. That means you're spiritually sick. We need to isolate ourselves from you because something's not right, and you don't want to catch the ick. But that's how it was. Yeah, we were kind of
okay.
We would have several Bible studies. I remember hearing about how important tithing was for your salvation and your blessings in heaven. And if you don't, then all right, good luck. We'll see.
Yeah. Which, basically can translate into this concept that you're in part, at least in some part, paying God money for him to let you into heaven, which presents a quite a problematic view, when you start to think of these things like mother's love and all that. What kind of mother demands her child pay her cash money in order to be welcomed into the house? And not only just to be welcomed into the house, but if you're, if you don't, my child whom I love so much, if you don't pay enough money every week, well, not only am I not going to let you in the house, I'm going to put you in a lake of fire.
Yeah, you could do everything else perfect, completely by the books, but if you're not giving contributions, if you're not giving offerings and tithes, just forget about you.
I can't say that this is something that happens in every different branch, because I know some members on the YouTube comments will come and say, well, no, that wasn't my experience and it wasn't like that for me. But in terms of like preaching to groups like homeless people, handicapped, elderly people, was that something that you were ever encouraged to do or discouraged from doing?
Yeah, certainly discouraged. I remember on several instances, many occasions where you'd be, say a college university walking on the streets and you see someone in a wheelchair or someone that's, not able-bodied, something, physically or, wrong with their appearance. It's like, there's something wrong. There's a reason why God made them like that. It's because of their sin in heaven. Don't preach to them. It's, God will judge them according to their own conscience and their own faith. So many times we're homeless and elderly. Yeah. It's basically kind of like stick to your own age group and some adults. Not necessarily naming them as like evil people, but there's something wrong with them. Like, be on your guard. Don't approach them. Don't invite them. We've had instances where people would come for food or things like that, but they would be normal human beings, have a full-time job, have their own residence, whatever, their own transportation. But if they didn't feel that they were a good offering, then we'll slowly, not communicate with them or slowly kind of isolate them from everyone else.
If you were to theorize, I guess, on why, I don't know if you have an opinion at all about it, but looking at that now, why do you think that is? Do you have any ideas about why you think it would be that they would not want members to reach out to people like this?
That's a good question, actually. I think if someone was handicapped or something like that, it's not a good look, for the church. I don't know if you've seen any of their welcome videos or pictures or anything like that. I mean, you hardly see anyone in a wheelchair or someone that's disabled or, try not to sound rude or anything like that, or someone that may not be fully functioning person, if you will. I don't know if it's because, they don't want to bring in someone that might be homeless or elderly. It's like, well, how are they going to contribute to the church? How can they contribute financially? How can they contribute their time, their own body for labor or any of their resources? Yeah. I think what they're looking for is just a prime, easy to influence young adult, male, female, or someone with a celebrity kind of profile, or someone that has a lot of money or wealth.
Yeah. Somebody who could potentially make them look good, make the church look good.
Yes.
And contribute something. So, which is just something that, for people listening, especially if you're a current member listening, I mean, just step back a minute and consider that. Think that through. And I mean, that's very problematic, especially when you're considering this group who claims to be the one true Church of God. Is that really what God's like? Is God really, up in heaven looking down at these people, the homeless and the handicapped and thinking, I don't want them, to be a part of the church because for whatever reason. I just think I would just encourage members, especially again, to consider that. And I think if you're thinking through that rationally, you should see that there's something very problematic about that, about the fact that I don't know that I've talked to a member that I've done an interview like this and asked that question and had a member say, oh no, the church really cared genuinely about people, no matter what sort of circumstances they're in, because, they have mother's love. They have the love of God motivating what they're doing. And they had genuine compassion for people. And it wasn't about what benefit the church could get from them, because, we had the truth of God and we're out to just help people. I've never heard anything like that. The reoccurring thing is every member I've talked to said, no, I was discouraged or in many cases I was explicitly told, or even I think sometimes rebuked for preaching to people in these sort of circumstances or situations. And that's just very ugly. It's just an ugly, horrible thing.
Yeah.
So as you were leaving, you decided to leave. How did the leadership, the other members respond to that? Did you ever talk to the leaders in that process and explain to them what was going on? Did you bring some of your concerns to them ever? I guess just how did they react to all of that?
Yeah, so towards the end, I was coming a lot less frequently, despite being talked to and things like that. And I would just, my excuse was, I need to work more. I need to earn money. I'm sick of living paycheck to paycheck. I'm trying to establish myself as an adult. But it came to a point where I was seeing my fiance, at the time, and we just started dating, and I came out with the one overseer because him and I came to grow a little bit on a closer, personal level, more of a friendship level. And I told him, I've been with this girl, we've seen each other, and we've slept together and everything. And he said, "Oh man, this is bad. Joey, what are we gonna do?" And I said, "Look, I know what my punishment is. I'm gonna get exiled from the church. I'm gonna get excommunicated, all that stuff, And what's interesting, that night, it was right after the final Sabbath service in the evening, and the overseer came out with an announcement that him and his wife were leaving, going to another church, and like 3 other members were leaving too. So I'm thinking, like, man, everyone's leaving. I'm leaving too. This is it. This is what I'm going to tell them. I know what I know what the consequences for me are gonna be, and this is it. So I kind of, once he made that announcement, I was firm in the ground, like, I'm leaving. But since I left, maybe for about a year, I would talk to one of the members, and we would just chit chat, nothing really much. And because we were pretty close, we did a lot of stuff together on a friend level. And he invited me out for dinner. We had dinner a couple times, and I knew his end goal was to try to bring me back. And the second time he came with the new member, or the new overseer of Pittsburgh, and they offered me to do Bible studies again. And I'm thinking, like, you guys, I've seen you do this to numerous other people. I'm not coming back. I'm sorry. I'll be your friend, but that's it. I'm not coming back. That chapter's over.
Yeah. And how did they respond to that?
That was basically it. It's like, all right, well, we'll be in touch, and no, that was it. And that was
okay.
Them. Besides my ex-wife, I haven't heard from them in a couple of years.
Yeah. So I know you talked about it a little bit already, but like, what has that process been like since you've left? Like, how have you coped after leaving the group? Has it been a struggle? And how have you kind of moved past that? And do you feel like you have fully moved past it?
Yeah. So at first, the first couple months were definitely hard. I think I was kind of fortunate in the sense of, I left a few weeks right before COVID shut down everything in the churches and whatnot. So everyone had to do at-home worship. And I tried that because my conditions were, I can stay, but I have to practice. I have to keep at-home worship, and I have to meet the overseer to give him my tithes and offerings once a week. And I did that for a couple of weeks, and I was falling asleep in service, and I'm just thinking, like, no. I was trying to have my cake and eat it too, kind of thing. And I was feeling guilty, at first, for the first couple weeks of months, because you still have that fear of, am I doing the right thing? Did I make a mistake? Is that really the truth? And I didn't know who to turn to or anything like that, because I didn't really have anyone that I knew that left. So I couldn't really go to them for advice. I didn't really want to open up to my family too much about it, because I know how quickly they would just say, we told you so, we told you so. So I kept it close, and I would only kind of confide in my fiance. And she really helped me just kind of overcome that. And we talked about it a lot. For me, it felt like I was just being repetitive, but it's just one of the things you need to talk to someone and explain your situations, whether it's a good situation or a bad situation that happened there. I would highly recommend just talking with someone about it and get it off your chest, and for them to let you know that the feelings that you do feel are normal. You're not a bad person because you love someone else, or if you're, whatever the case may be, you have different desires than what the church's views are. So that's what I would say to help someone to cope. Just talk, even with a therapist if you need to. Professional help, it definitely helps. But as of now, I think I've fully moved on. I don't have any regrets leaving. If anything, my life has improved, tenfold, since leaving.
Yeah. And they say that if you leave, your life is gonna be horrible. You're gonna get cancer or get in a car wreck or, get possessed by a demon or all these sort of crazy things. So
No,
so you're saying that's not your experience though?
No, my life, thankfully, things are going fantastically,
Yeah. Do you feel more emotionally free, I guess, just in general, more free in your life, more at peace than you did when you were in there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, just the whole fear thing and anxiety was, it took me a long time to even swear again, let alone, touch alcohol or do anything like that. But just living a normal life, it's a lot easier. I feel happy as a person. I feel like I have me back. When I was in that church, it wasn't the Joey that I knew.
Yeah. So you mentioned like that kind of the what if questions that you had, what if this is true? Looking at that now, and that's something that I'm confident many people, whether it's this particular cult group or another one that they've left recently, for some, that sort of doubt, that sort of fear hangs on to them for a long time. So I guess like looking back at the WMSCOG now in particular, like, are there any things that now looking at it, you can pretty quickly think of things that tell you or prove to you that, no, this is not the truth? What are there any things like that would stand out to you that you could mention?
I think just how much they ask of you in terms financially. It's too much. It's too much for a young adult, college students and stuff, people that are trying to establish themselves in the world just to be a normal human being. What they ask is just too much to devote of yourself, whether it's financially, whether it's your body, your time, things along that nature. In terms of like actual prophecies and studies to see, if I were to see it, is that a red flag or not? I think I was taking in all the information as just information and just regurgitating what I would hear and not actually digesting it and like processing it and taking it to heart. I would say, yes, I believe in God the Father, God the Mother. You look at the family system on earth, the family system in heaven, all that, and just see it kind of as face value. But in terms of like other studies and prophecies, I wish I could see red flags in them. I know others can, and I've had others explain them to me, and now I see it. I'm sure big one, Daniel's prophecy, and some of the other bigger prophecies and stuff. But the biggest red flags for me is just the time that they ask of you. It's just too much.
Yeah. A lot of people, leaving this group again have different kind of reactions to faith and God and kind of what they do with that afterwards. Like, so what does that look like for you since leaving? Do you still believe in God? Has this kind of left a bad taste in your mouth and convinced you, as it has many others, that, all this religion stuff is just, a sham or kind of, I guess, what's kind of been your process with all that?
So like being in the church, I would always, I think I remember a couple of times where me and some of the other guys would kind of joke around and said, if this ain't the truth, then I'd rather be atheist, that kind of thing. Or I'd rather just not even believe in God. And I'm not going to lie, it has put a really sour taste in my mouth towards, I think, religion as a whole, not in the sense of, is there a God or is there not a God? To me, I like to believe that there is. I'm optimistic and exploring that down the road. But right now, I don't have any current plans to join any kind of faith group or spiritual organization or anything like that. The church definitely put a really bad taste in my mouth.
one of the common questions I get is what you just mentioned. If this isn't the truth, then I'd rather be an atheist or whatever. But so what I even just last week had a member commenting on one of my videos saying almost exactly that. Like, well, if this church isn't the truth, and it's I think a lot of times it's not like a genuine question. It's more of like an antagonistic sort of statement. But if this isn't the truth, then what is? Sort of with this kind of underlying assumption that there's nothing else out there, and there's no other possible alternative way to live your life if you leave this group. So so I guess what would you say to members like that who are asking that sort of question?
I think I would say to them, just you need to take yourself outside the box and look at yourself from the outside in. And you got to realize there's more to life than being in the WMSCOG, because what they're promising you is just more lies to manipulate you, to control you for their own agenda. That's what I've seen. That's what I've experienced. I'd hold on to that.